and so on. Whereas RDU on his mage is going to have a much more straightforward game plan, although of course doesn't have the chance to just dig for some of those crazy outcomes that can maybe help you out with certain games. But let's just dive straight into it. The finals here of this week of the European Grandmasters. The winner takes home 5 points. The loser still goes home with 4.
Yes, and again, serious journalist here reporting for duty. I do not want to resort to hyperbole or false statements. I will no longer claim that we have seen either Flow or Lunacy in every single game that we've seen so far this week in Europe, because we did have a couple today where neither came to pass, but it has still been an overwhelmingly statistical anomaly in favor of just drawing the absolute nuts with this deck. And RDU is right back on it yet again, but Bozzzton on the other side, no such luck so far. He still has a couple of turns to pick up the deck of Lunacy, which is an other option available to his deck, but RDU is going to be off to the races here with both Font of Power and the Incanter's Flow.
Yeah, and a very interesting evolution of how Mage has changed over the past few months. In the Deep Freeze, used to be a great outcome from a Discover or a Generation, right? High value, right. Tons of stats. In this matchup, 8 mana you want to spend on one card that doesn't do 100 to face? Ha! You fool. So now it looks like awkward choices. Even though it's expensive, I feel like Bozzzton almost just has to pick Mask of Cthulhu here.
Even if it was 8 mana, deal 100 to face, as Lorinda would tell you, that card would still be pointless because mages kill their opponents on turn 5.
Oh, I'm the only one who's found that funny because I know the backstory to that conversation. No, just know it's very funny.
I wouldn't have gone there, but like TJ brought it up in Americas and like canonized it, so I feel safer like making fun of him.
Is it part of the Lorinda lore now?
It is now, yeah. It's part of Lorinda's backstory.
Well, RDU getting off to that coin. Apex's Blast nice and early. Not the best minion outcome. I guess that's below average, right? As a 3/5. But it is still
slightly below average, yeah. Yep.
This is what's a little bit frustrating now. Like, Bozzzton has an Incanter's Flow in hand now, which he can play this time. Fantastic. That's also funny. But, like, he has so much of his burn. Obviously, one mask was discovered, but so much of his burn already is so expensive that it just still feels bad now. He's got to really rely on the card draw coming out thick and fast for him.
Yeah, absolute emotional roller coaster on that devolving missiles, right? It went 4, 3, 2, and then it was like, okay, just 3 health minion, 3 health minion, 3 health minion. Oh, 4 health minion. Oh, Moog. Okay, sure.
You'll do.
Yeah.
Oh, what a classic on the board right now. Good old River Croc.
All we need now is a Houndmaster Raven and the game just ends. Remember those days? The simple days of Hearthstone?
Fondly.
River Croc into Coin Houndmaster and the game ended.
How do I compete with all these stats?
Yeah.
The only thing that used to stop it was like innovates into a Yeti.
That's it. Yep. Now we play Emperor Thaurissan on turn 1 and gain 20 mana on turn 2.
Oh, this is horrible for Bozzzton though. Ring toss. When you're the turn afterwards that it's been played on the other side of the board, like what does Bozzzton prioritize here? Does he have to throw the ring toss, or do you think he can just say fireball ping and then cry a little bit?
I mean, yeah, no matter what else you do this turn, I think crying is an essential part of the turn. Yeah. But the sequencing, I'm not quite sure about. Whether you start the turn with cry, not sure what that plays around. Crying is important, though.
Bozzzton with Flame Strike. The good thing about this is because of the way the secrets interact, it doesn't proc the Netherwind, right? So by only playing one spell, Bozzzton has arguably like limited the damage that has happened that turn with just saying, okay, I'll just proc the counter spell. Netherwind Portal won't proc, so then there won't be a minion now hitting me in the face with that initiative.
Yeah. Just in case people don't fully have a handle on that yet, there's no like sequencing concerns with that whatsoever.
Right.
It just always works that way around. Doesn't matter which one you play first. When things entered play, it's just counterspell will always counter the first spell, and then Netherwind Portal will always activate off the second one.
Out of the kitchen and into the frying pan.
Ooh, nutter butter.
Yeah, the Croc getting the damage in as well.
Yeah, it's pushing, right? I think it was a smart decision, honestly. Like, I was kind of memeing on the turn with the horrible turn into the ring toss, but I think Bozzzton made the right decision. It's very freeze mage style play, right? Which I think this is a very similar matchup to. It all happens a lot quicker than it used to back in the freeze mage days, but it's a very similar matchup where it's not super board focused and it's just chucking burn back and forwards and trying to find those extra turns here and there so you can chuck more burn. So as many players in the freeze mage mirrors would just throw away Flame Strike just to make space in hand, I think Bozzzton doing the same thing there, just throwing away Flame Strike to deal with the counterspell.
What would have been sick was that if RDU just didn't pick counterspell and he just got a Netherwind portal to go off and it's like, why, thank you. It'd be like Netherwind portal rigged fair game or something. It's like, oh, thanks.
I would have the dumbest looking play of all time, right? If you just hard cast Flame Strike and then your opponent's board got bigger and they drew 3 cards.
Yeah. Oh, wow. RDU, though, just stacking the damage. Doesn't have any more burn apart from that rune in hand. But still, he's got a lot of burn on board in the form of minions, and Bozzzton has to do something quite impressive to get out of this.
Yep. So Font of Power into Aegwin himself, like hitting some kind of spell damage here. If not, Varden. Get himself out of it. Okay, Aegwin Shooting Star now does do some work.
Yeah, Mazaki would have been interesting as well, right?
Oh wait, Aegwin Firebrand Shooting Star. That's like the absolute turbo nuts, right?
Yeah, I was going to say Mazaki into Ring Toss Shooting Star would have been okay, but not perfect, of course. But yeah, this isn't so bad. But does he see it?
Also, once again, RDU, this 1-1 in the middle, like, I'm so annoyed. Not sure whether he had control over this one, because the Aegwin came from where? Was it from an Apexis Blast? I'm not sure.
It was.
So then, like, did he place the Blood Mage Thalnos naturally? Because he could always put that to the left of the Cutter Butter instead of to the right, so then at least...
To at least have, some kind of margin, right?
Yeah.
But also, Boston's gone for the secrets here, so he's basically thrown away the clear. Unless this works as well.
Is this just better? Okay, I haven't counted this.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, this is smart. This is smart. This is straight up better. Straight up better. Yeah, okay, good spot. Did not even look at this, I will confess.
Bozzzton,
a better play.
You just have 1 point over me in Sol right now.
Yep.
Really making RDU have to slam on the brakes here, honestly, because 2 secrets and the minion pressure on board. It's not like RDU has a huge life lead. Only 4, which is nothing in a Mage Mirror.
I'm not going down without a fight.
Oh no! Dark Spear Berserker is back, Raven. Oh, it's disgusting. Okay, gonna rip the devolving anyway.
He's not gonna hit it. He's not gonna hit it.
Question. Yep. Okay, well, that's a bit weird. Gonna ask the question about whether he might just toss some damage into that first, but he did in the end rip the devolving missiles, and I guess that's the middling outcome in the end, right?
Yeah, okay. I was trying to work out a way whether he could get a good clear off with like combustion and even maybe fireball, because again, if he uses fireball to kill the 5/7, it just deals 1 less damage to face than it would have normally. But this is a little bit of a different route. He's going to use Varden to freeze the board out, so he's not going to take any minion damage, and he still has options of killing that 5/7 next turn. I think this is just Mask, right?
It's so annoying because the remaining secret for Bozzzton is Ice Barrier. So in normal circumstances, he'd be well within his rights to just completely ignore this 3/3, right? And just go for just drawing cards and burn damage instead. But because the 3/3 helps to kill the 5/7 in some worlds, it is actually threatening damage even though there's an Ice Barrier in play, which is disgusting.
The problem now is leaving the minion up. He's actually going to give him lethal, right? If he leaves this up.
Is it?
Well, you can trade into the 5/7, then Flame Strike, and then Rune or Ping, right?
Nope.
Oh, no. 1 mana off, 1 mana off. Sorry.
Yeah.
It was close, though. He's going to kill it off. Okay. There is still, of course, just Rune Orb into whatever to actually just end the game anyway.
Yes. Rune Orb into either Fireball or Apexis Blast will do the job here. Possible that Brain Freeze and the like could do it as well. Might be efficient enough to kill the 5/7 and deal the 5 damage and still be able to get the ping in. Right? Yeah, Combustion, Brain Freeze, ping would have still been lethal as well, so he could have picked up Brain Freeze there.
So, because he has Flurry now, he can afford to draw, right?
Yep.
I feel like drawing's a good next plan.
Agreed. He will currently freeze 2 with the Flurry, so he needs to kill 2 minions to prevent taking any damage here.
Time runs out on me.
Takes the free lab partner, that gives him the Combustion. Very nice. He can now draw 2 more cards. He can Combustion now.
Oh, there's the Fireball. Never mind.
Flurry, and it all didn't matter because he found the Fireball anyway. But the sequencing all at the end there was actually very, very nice because he gave himself a variety of outs. As I was saying, if he hadn't have hit the lethal there, which I think he might also have had with the Brain Freeze and the Combustion, as I was talking about previously, but if he hadn't have hit the lethal, he got himself the free lab partner, so he just Combustions on the right, on the 3/4 and the 1/1 to kill 2 minions, then he can Flurry to freeze the other 2 minions. He takes 0 damage, he has some health in play to play around Mask, so even if he weren't to hit the lethal, he was set up very, very nicely with the way he played the turn.
Yeah, it was tricky though, wasn't it? It showed some level of discipline, or at least a strong plan of what he wanted or could do with the turn, because he would have left potentially Aegwin on board, right? If it frozen that and the 5/7, and we could see in Bozzzton's hand double Fireball at the time, so there was a small level of fear that if he didn't actually win that turn, there was a chance that Bozzzton could have ended it in his way, as you can see there with the double Fireball. So a little bit tricky, but RDU obviously getting so deep into his deck with that card draw, he knew that, okay, well, I have the damage in there, I just need to get to it. And even if I couldn't, Bozzzton needs specific things to like punish it on the next turn anyway. So well played there from RDU. Bozzzton just not quite getting there enough, and those freezes really paying off for RDU, honestly, just stalling out that minion base that Bozzzton had built up.
Yeah, and even then, right, with the Aegwin, if he could have diverted still, right? It would have been very hard to process it all with the rope burning, but he could have drawn like devolving missiles, for example.
Right, exactly.
And then frozen. He could have diverted and used the Brain Freeze and the Combustion instead to kill bigger minions and freeze smaller minions if he needed to. There's a lot of ways he could have played around it, but yeah, that Varden freeze ended up being super clutch. And remember, if we rewind time, that was a font of power that RDU used to test Counterspell while his hand was full. So he only got 1 minion off the font of power, and it was Varden.
Yep, you only need one if it's going to be that good
in the game. Yeah, true.
Well, so far, one player has managed to play the Incanter's Flow, so looking good here.
Yeah, RDU actually not in a bad spot as the non-flow player here, though. He has the best thing you can possibly do when you don't have flow, which is minions to start into coin Apexis Blast.
Right.
Which is just a ton of tempo and a ton of damage being threatened straight away. So RDU is by no means out of this one just yet. If you can pick up Combustion, for example, here, just to be able to remain in board control, but he does not. So I imagine he's looking for another playable here. Mini-Mage is perfect.
Yeah, in general, if you're in this matchup and your opponent does Incanter's Flow and you don't, all you need to focus on is maximum pressure every single turn.
RDU might be considering Blood Mage because he's valuing 1 extra card draw for an Incanter's Flow or something next turn to be able to catch back up. But I think in the end, he's just going to stick the Mini-Mage and chooses to trade here to play around both Combustion and Shooting Star on the other side to protect his Mini-Mage, which I do like as well.
Yeah, not really super intuitive either, because when RDU's playing like the raw burn version of Mage, you feel like every point of damage counts, but he would have lost, or potentially lost, his Mini-Mage, so really nice little play there from RDU.
Oh,
finally gets the Flow, but is that really going to change his turn?
I don't think so. It's coin Apexis, Apexis, and then Flow Springwater on the turn after, right?
I like that.
Curve, I think is the curve from here. Oh, Talon, what are you doing here? No one likes you.
It's got some bonuses. You probably don't want to devolve in missiles it. It's got Divine Shield, so it can't just be Brain Freeze off. Yeah, Bozzzton going to clean this up. Obviously not going to draw a minion. There's not been any Astromancer Solarium played.
Right. Oh, really? Gonna go Ring Toss instead of a Pexis Blast to disrupt the Phoenix turn? I can get behind it. I think personally, I would still just be an Apexis Blast gamer here. I don't know.
Oh, it's really
I guess doing
tough
it
to
this
call,
way.
honestly.
Yeah, I guess doing it this way, he's disrupting enough where he can go like Incanter's Flow, Spring Water, and then it's a matter of emergency. He could just Apexis Blast the 2/3 next turn if he needs to, but he's also likely to pick up a zero cost Brain Freeze or Devolving Missiles or something cheap enough to just be able to shoot at it, and then Apexis Blast face again next turn. The more I look at it, the more I'm actually okay with this.
I actually quite like Jandis here.
And get behind that.
Mainly because RDU hasn't flowed yet, so there's no mask punish, right?
Correct.
And
yeah.
it only gives him a 2/1 into entity. Like, all looks good to me.
Yep, I like it. Don't mess around with dealing with what any of these secrets are. Just do the powerful thing that isn't going to get punished.
Let's make something real.
All right, first super powerful turn of the game now for RDU with the flow into Spring Water. I do like the way he's played this curve the more and more I look at it.
Double Fireball, not super important right now, but now, does he have to just rely and lean back on another Ring Toss again? Feels like this second one is not quite as strong as the first one was.
No, agreed.
What if he just Fireballs face?
What to do?
Pushes 8.
What to do?
Could do a Desperation Cram Session. My only worry is he has a very limited amount of things that he could even draw into that would have an impact on his turn. Maybe he's okay going Cram Session Ping. He can trade the Jandis and ping off the 3/2. Still not looking great with 7 attacks still on board and one of those minions being +2 spell damage.
Yeah, that's the big issue, right? Is that everything you're saying just leaves the Phoenix alive. But then if you ask me to actually create a solution to that,
Yeah,
I
there isn't
can't.
one. Yeah. It just is bad.
It's just a miserable situation, yeah. So Bozzzton still has Unknown Secret to be dealing with this turn. He just jammed Jandis on the previous turn, so is yet to deal with Netherwind Portal, Counterspell, all that good stuff. Just slams Brain Freeze, okay. Yeah, makes sense.
I was a tiny bit surprised that he's doing it this way around. Okay. I guess he's going to
discount your deck, draw 3 more cards, right? Like, this just has to be powerful. There's no way.
I was just looking at, in terms of turns worth of mana, I tried to get that without tripping over my own words, then whether it could have been that into just mask this turn. Because you're still gaining from the spell damage. There's still another mask and a fireball at that moment in time in hand.
I think you're going to have a hard time selling me on a play that doesn't cast Cram Session when you have Phoenix.
I agree.
And I think if you're doing that, then Bozzzton's very weird looking sequencing I think is the only correct way to go about doing it. So.
Right. Yeah, I'm not going to argue with you over drawing a ton of cards in Spellmage, so...
Yeah. The Wind and possibly Ice Barrier there, since there is a minion in play. Just essentially delete it from your mind.
I was actually thinking about Rigged that turn, believe it or not.
Interesting. Well, Bozzzton went Mirror, so he is on another level entirely.
Just because you imagine this trade always happens, and then are you really going to get, like, just fireballed in the face or something? I guess Mask is a bit of a fear, but okay.
Genuinely, I'm not making it up. I hadn't seen it. It's happened 3 times now. Oh!
Okay.
Oh, get in the bin. The absolute dream Raz. Now, Bozzzton would be forgiven for thinking, well, if that's what happens when you cast Apexis Blast, I will just Apexis Blast my opponent's 3/6 and then fireball them in the face, and then my Raz will clear up their board. But unfortunately, that's not particularly reliable.
And this is a turning point in the game, I think, here, because Bozzzton maybe could be tempted to like Flame Strike Ping because it's clean and gets rid of the Raz, but I think that is so slow and reactive, it will actually just make him lose the game.
I think it's like fireball the Raz mask.
Yeah.
You don't need all this damage, right? I don't think.
Do you think you could also devolve? Could you ping devolving mask?
Because you don't need the devolving this turn, I'm tempted to save the devolving for the second mask, right? To guarantee that that deals a ton of damage. Because I don't think you need both masks, both fireballs, and a devolving missile. Well, so it's just a matter of whether you want to use the devolving missile or the fireball this turn. And I think it's pretty close either way.
Well, for me, he has fireball, Apexis next turn, right?
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Which
yeah,
is a lot of damage to want to do in one turn to face.
Yes. You are 100% correct. I had not factored in that those all fit into the same turn last turn. That is much, much better.
And now RDU needs exactly Counterspell to stop this from happening. That we can see, of course. He won't know this, but Counterspell has to be live or he's just dead, as Mage does not typically have a way to actually heal.
And I think, honestly, he might not even play around it because casting Ring Toss here would drastically disrupt his ability to set up his own 2-turn lethal, right? So I think RDU might just close his eyes and say, my opponent cannot deal 14 with 15 cards left in their deck, which honestly is a pretty reasonable thing to assume, right?
Oh, yeah. This is going to be an unexpected way for the game to end. I was looking at whether he went, okay, he's going to do it. Let's see if he goes Counterspell. I imagine there's not a world in which he doesn't.
Yep.
Looked like a snap pick.
It did. Took Mirror while he knew
Mirror
had
Counterspell.
no minions in hand, which is a bit strange, but there weren't really better picks offered. Yeah.
Oh, the brain freeze off the top for 0. Gonna soak up that Counterspell, and RDU is about to be obliterated by all of this face damage.
Super clutch brain freeze off the top for Bozzzton to be able to end the game. I was just waiting for the reaction from RDU because he is known to be a very expressive player when he gets a bad beat like that. And honestly, I think all of that burn stacked within the top 15 cards of the deck is a pretty bad beat for RDU to be facing down there. But he took it in his stride. Looks like he's just ready to queue up game number 3 now for the final.
Yeah, I think when you played this many Mage Mirrors subtle, you become a bit numb to some of the outcomes, and you just like, okay. And it did look like Bozzzton was setting up for some damage, right, just in the way he played the previous turn. So we'll see how it pans out for our game number 3 and final game of this series and of today and of this weekend.
Yeah, it was that tough decision it came down to. It was 2 draws back-to-back of 0-mana spells that really changed the game. I think the combination of that devolving missiles that Bozzzton picked up, as you spotted, making the much better play of being able to devolve and set up direct 2-turn lethal, and then the brain freeze being ripped for 0 on the exact following turn to be able to prop the counterspell for 0-mana and be able to squeeze in double fireball Apexis Blast. That combination of those 2 things gave Bozzzton an accelerated clock by exactly 1 turn, right? Which could have ended up being all the difference based on what RDU could fire back at him. But RDU is straight back to business and has a pretty dreamy looking opening hand, if I do say so myself. Bozzzton gives the shake of the head. He does have the underrated tool of something to spend his first mana of the game on, in my opinion, but still is very, very lacking in the tools you need to put together a powerful hand.
Yeah, and in this situation, I was going to ask you, but I think this is just correct. Picking Phoenix and saying, I am just going to believe that Phoenix will pay off, and you'll get hold of a cramp session by the time Phoenix procs, I think is completely reasonable here.
Job's done.
Yeah, agreed. I talked about this yesterday. It's a dynamic that I'm still not 100% comfortable with in my own mind about, whether you take Phoenix over like Blood Mage, for example, when you're not guaranteeing that Phoenix is going to draw you any cards if you don't see Cram Session by the time it's going to come up, where Blood Mage will at least draw you 1. But I think, out of those options that were presented, I think Phoenix was possibly the best pick.
Okay, so Bozzzton's now just thinking, cram session, cram session, cram session. Because if he can go flow cram session this turn, that is going to be mighty fine.
Oh! The nod! Are there any nodders in chat?
Sometimes you've just got to believe. And how do you reacted to that one, Sottle, much more they reacted to the lethal from last game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one is perhaps even more important as we're sat here in game number 3. And sometimes early game outcomes don't feel as important as decisions in the late game that just straight up end the game. But that turned Bozzzton's hand into one that was looking borderline unplayable to one that just has the juice rolling now.
And sometimes you've just got to believe in the Phoenix. And RDU, though, even after that turn from Bozzzton, is by no means out. He, of course, flowed early on. He has another refreshing spring water. He has some reasonable minions. And he also could just coin Apexis at the end of this turn, right?
Yes, refreshing now will refresh him back up to 4, and then he does have the coin available at the end of it.
So
he does it all in a sensible order.
So if you're wondering, really, RDU's reaction was more to Bozzzton catching up a bit, as opposed to Bozzzton winning now because of that turn. It's just RDU was so far ahead, but then Bozzzton had a huge leap in catching him up in this game.
75 seconds ago, he had a free win and he had $3,000 in his pocket and he had 5 points. And as that cram session was drawn, he realized he was going to have to play a game of Hearthstone here.
The Berserker, though, is pretty sick. Must kill minion here.
The Gooberashi.
The Goober. Yeah, as some of the casters like to call it. And people say I say words wrong.
I popped so hard when he called it Gooberashi. I don't know why I found it so funny, but I just did.
Okay. Bozzzton gets his own imprisoned.
Yeah.
Starscryer as well is one of those like weirdly underrated minions from Font because it is just another card draw.
Yeah, that's right. It's just a bigger Blood Mage Thalnos, right?
Yeah.
Exactly the same thing, just no spell damage, but it's threatening 3 if your opponent doesn't want to deal with it.
Planets and stars! Power for the taking!
Pew! Bozzzton just choosing to cycle it immediately into the Imprisoned Observer, but he is letting spell damage stick around here, which is a scary proposition.
Yeah, I think he wanted to wait, right, and have Shooting Star to actually hit this Observer as well.
True.
For that plan, he is going to take some extra.
Cram Session would be the dream. Doesn't find it, though. Apexis Blast is a good consolation prize. Actually, I didn't notice there was a Cram Session buried all the way over on the left already, so perhaps the card draw was not even required there from RDU's perspective.
I think I do like this approach, though. Just play another reasonably high health minion on board.
Yeah, just not.
Don't play on that side, RDU. Yeah, we were both there. Like, come on, don't do this to us.
Doesn't actually matter, right? Because the Observer's waking up, or is it waking in 2 turns?
No, it's next turn. It's the turn after.
Yeah. So positioning does very much matter here, and RDU does get it right.
And although this looks bad, in a sense, because, you played another minion to Flame Strike. If Bozzzton just Flame Strikes this turn, RDU's probably not happy about it, but okay with it, right? It's not actually Bozzzton developing his own game plan.
It says explode!
And actually, if I'm going to really put my nerd glasses on and get super picky, this is still wrong. In a weird world, if the Blood Mage lived another turn and you're going to Apexis Blast next turn, you then have a situation where you would have 4/5, then the Blood Mage, and then your 5-drop minion over on the right-hand side of the board, which would make the Blood Mage an insane combustion target. So I would have put the 3/5 on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side.
You combustion your own Blood Mage before that happens.
Yeah. Actually, that doesn't work, right? That doesn't work. He had to He had to do it this way. Yeah, no, this is fine. I take it all back.
Jeez. Why'd you hate RDU, Sol?
Look, when you're deep into like hour 12 of consecutive Mage Mirrors, you have to try and find something worthwhile to talk about in terms of actual Hearthstone decisions being made.
Well, something to talk about now is that pull off the Apexis Blast for Bozzzton. Not bad. Not obviously the biggest, most threatening minion, but a little bit of extra health in there as well for the armor that he'll get.
Yep.
Until it gets devolved.
Also, once again, opportunity for the Imprisoned Observer to have been in the middle of that board, which was not taken by Bozzzton by him playing the lab partner to the right instead of to the left.
Really grinds your gears, doesn't it, Sam?
Just get it right. That's all I'm saying.
Just be better. Here, though, Bozzzton all the way down to 11 in the final game of this series. He does have a ton of burn to be able to potentially catch up. But RDU only needs a little bit more himself, but 1 mana off being able to Fireball and a Pexis Blast. So he does have Fireball Ring Toss this turn to go halfway, right? And that looks pretty good to me, Subtle.
Yeah, as long as you can fit in... You don't even really need to fit in pings, do you? Doesn't really help playing around anything.
No, I think he actually just devolves, right?
Yeah, sure. I can see that.
Just why not? Yeah.
Can even take Ice Barrier here, which essentially just deletes the minion anyway.
Sure, and he can actually save the font for next turn, so he can proc the counterspell for 0 if one comes down, and then get the Fireball. Oh, sorry, get the Apexis Blast, apologies.
Doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, if he took Ice Barrier here, he could just throw the burn at face, which I guess plays around Counterspell to some degree, but he has Counterspell beat anyway because he has 0 power into Fireball or Pexis Blast, so whether or not he cast a burn spell that turn is largely irrelevant, I think. I like that he didn't cast a Pexis Blast. I can't think of what the disaster would be, but when you're ahead like this, simplify, right? So just avoid doing anything random because random things can go wrong, which he absolutely did that turn. So I think this is the right way of doing it.
I believe there's no pull from Netherwind that Bozzzton could get, which would stop him taking the damage to face, right?
Right.
There's not, right? So even if now Bozzzton played Ring Toss into Netherwind, and Ardu obviously procs the Netherwind with the first spell, there's nothing that stops him playing the second one. So yeah, I think this might, again, just be checkmate. Bozzzton is going to dig, though, for a way to catch up.
Time runs out on me.
Oh, this looks great. Just too expensive. I guess Minimage is there, but what's it going to achieve this turn? Minimage into a Pexis, maybe?
Yeah, looks like it. But the days of 5 drops that can immediately heal you are long gone, I believe.
Yep.
There is the option for, let me see. Yeah, he could have got the 3/7 taunt with Frenzy and then brain freezed it himself for a little burst of armor at the end there. That was a potential out. So I do like that Bozzzton was holding on to the brain freeze for as long as possible at the end, but the outs on either side were extremely niche in that position. You do just really have to bring up your spreadsheet and dig through looking for answers there, and I can only think of one that could have helped Bozzzton in that spot. Very, very nicely set up for RDU, and a very, very strong performance for the G2 representative who takes down the week. And as I was saying, he now has 5 additional points to his name. He has $3,000 for the week in his pocket, and he has the title of Week 4 champion. But great performance there from everyone in our top 4. Bozzzton, I think, putting in a great showing. And Yala, as we covered earlier, now, of course, going to be leading the way after Week 4, topping the standings with his semi-final performance.
Yeah, I think it's just been great. Although, yes, there's been a lot of mage mirrors, there are some interesting plays, right, and interesting approaches that we've seen from these players. And this is something that I do think is a great strength of Europe right now, is that the actual development of how to play this mage. Yes, the deck is very powerful, but how to play it well in multiple different matchups has really grown a lot, and is what, for me, has actually put the deck at the top of the meta right now in terms of strength. It's not just the 30 cards, it really is this just the polish on how to actually play in those matchups. So really, really impressive overall, and a good win for RDU, especially considering we are about to go into last hero standing weeks, which is I guess RDU's and even Tice's like old home turf, right, from their original strong performances in the earlier days of Hearthstone. But let's look at the standings, Subtle, and take a look at where everyone lies. Look at the difference between Yala and then that bottom cut of the standings. It is huge.
Yeah, but at least I think Bunny Hopper, for example, Falcane, for example, KC Psycho, basically everyone over on that right-hand side will be counting their blessings that the likes of A-Rock, Zim, Frenetic, who actually made it to broadcast this week, did not go on that big run. Those players were not the ones that were filling out the top 4 spots. Obviously, for the sake of those players, that's terrible news, but for everyone else over on that right-hand side, that's good news, because it means that things stay a lot more congested over there, and it's those bottom 4 spots that you are looking at in terms of relegation. But over on the right-hand side, Yala, Tice, RDU, I think that's a fantastic looking top 3. 2 fantastic legacy choices in terms of Tice and RDU, and as you were mentioning, old stalwarts of the last hero standing style that we're about to go into, and then perhaps the most dominant player of the modern era, in my opinion, with Yala coming out instead. But if you think RDU's going to have an edge with last hero standing, Raven, you wait until Strike Week. That's when he's really going to show his dom. That's not actually a thing.
In 2025. And just a shout out also to Bozzzton, because he basically went from one side of that table straight across to the other. I think he was at 5th with 8 points, if my short-term memory works. So yeah, really good week for Bozzzton there, getting a strong performance and just shifting himself much further up in those standings. But that is just another week of Grandmasters done. We are now done with Specialist. We're going to be moving on to that last hero standing. But that means we are all finished here in Europe for the week. We do, of course, have Americas to finish up later on in the day, so make sure to stick around and check out when that goes live in just a few hours' time. But from Salt and myself, we are done. Thanks a lot for watching and have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week.